Hello and welcome. I'm very excited to be able to share this talk with you today. Beyond the AI Copilot, Developer Productivity in the Post-GPT World. My name is Chris Harrold, and I am a Director of Product Management and Developer Programs for Ansys. I've been in technology for a long time and have been around to see many trends come and go. I have spent a good part of my recent career in AI and machine learning. With this insider knowledge of AI and machine learning tools, I'm not as prone to hyperbole as with the current hype cycle around generative AI. It must be acknowledged, however, that generative AI, and in particular, its application to creating code, is one of the most impactful tech trends in recent history. It is one that is very much at the forefront of many conversations that I am sure all of you are having. And my goal today is to give you my advice about how to handle this hype. What I want you to take away from this talk is, what is the current state of generative tools, generative AI tools like ChatGPT and Llama and Bard and all the rest. The pitfalls of generative AI, particularly when it comes to legal and compliance, and how you can strike a balance between AI and not AI. Most importantly, how do you ready your teams for success in the post-GPT world? Okay, so let's start with some quick, no hype basics, right? What is generative AI, and why are ChatGPT and other large language models, LLMs, the new hotness? Generative AI is a top-level discipline that is part of the larger AI ML landscape, and it covers a lot of ground. In the shortest possible description, what generative AI does is it makes a pretty good guess at the answer to something out of the information it was trained on. And that can be any kind of basic output media like pictures or video, music, text, and in our case, code. To be clear, generative AI is not new at all. It's been around for many years now in other forms. Older tools were just smaller and trained on really specific things. For example, you could feed an older generative AI tool the collected works of Shakespeare and then ask it to spit out a Shakespearean sonnet. This is both an incredible advancement for its time and staggeringly useless in the general world. Also, they tended to be pretty bad at it as well, because there's really no such thing as enough training data. This is why GPT and in particular the LLM are important evolutions in the concept of generative AI. They remove the singularity of the tools that came before and make them more general. Now we can ask general questions of the model. As a person looking for a job, write me a resume for blank, right? Whatever the job description is. In the words of a marketer, hype AI for me, right? And you'll get some great marketing output. Create a C++ library that allows me to interact with an API, right? And it will do that. Instead of having to have trained that specific model for that specific question, you get general answers that apply to that general question from a general set of data. Since you're not just training the model on how to write like Shakespeare or paint like Salvador Dali or make Kurosawa movies, you're now training out literally everything and anything, right? This makes it much more likely to be able to predict a reasonable answer for you in the midst of all of the background noise that's available in that data set. This is a big deal. And as I said in the intro, I am generally an AI skeptic. And while what generative AI is not true AI, right, regardless of the absolutely absurd claims to the contrary, it is nonetheless a huge step forward in capability for machine learning that powers it. And there's no doubt that it should absolutely be recognized for the impact it's had on advancing machine learning as a whole. There's no understating it. Unfortunately, the LLM GPT combo is also a pretty major weakness, which is true of all systems that are built on being massively general. Garbage in, garbage out, right? GIGO. Remember, all AI is math. And all the math that's getting done is probability. The more times a thing happens in the training source, in the data the model was trained on, the more probable it is according to the model. For example, what is the probability that the next word in this sentence that I am speaking right now is flapjacks? Well, given this is a talk about AI, very, very low. However, what if I only trained my model on the Waffle House menu? Well, here we are. The less good your input is, the less good the output is, and the more time you're going to have to spend fixing those mistakes. Ironically, or interestingly, depending on how you view it, GPT knows this because I asked it what the next word in this sentence is, and it said, the probable answer is literally any word in the English language. By the way, it ended up suggesting that it would choose the word likely, given the context of this talk. Fine. Basic reality check then. Public AI, all of these generative models, is trained on the internet. All of it. Everything that could be publicly accessed on the internet at the end of 2022 is now available in ChatGPT and others like Bard and Llama, etc. And like, look, have you seen the garbage that's on the internet? There is so much there, and so much of it is either just outright wrong, bad, or very, very questionable. You only need to look at the comments on videos or a few Reddit streams for a few minutes to understand that unfortunately, a ton of data points that were used to create the answers that power these GPT models aren't exactly glowing examples of the best humanity has to offer. So when we take that same concern into code, the things that our devs need to do to be the most right, we find we rapidly run into issues with accuracy and completeness. To put it mildly, there are a lot of opinions on the internet, and some are even right. This is true in all areas, but when you need code that does something super important, right, the last thing you want to do is trust some random code from the internet. So, sounds like generative AI is all bad, right? We should all sit around and wait for something better? Not quite. Generative AI does have a role to play in helping developers. For basic repeated stuff that everyone knows, but searches for anyway, it is absolutely dead useful. How do I build a for loop? Where does the comma go here? How do I do pointers, iterators, arrays, lists, whatever it is? Help me start to build an X of Y to do Z, etc. Spot on. Where it tends to fall apart is the thing that you would actually make it the most valuable for you, which is advanced code and domain knowledge. You build software that tracks satellites. Not a lot of people do that. Not a lot of people need that level of robustness. Can generative AI do it? Yeah, kind of. It will do the best that it can. Will it be any good? Nah, marginal at best, right? A basic specific example. I was working on a simple pathfinding algorithm, find a route from point A to point B, avoiding obstacles, and said, hey, you know what? I'm going to give GPT a go at this, see what it can come up with. It produced one, but it was comically bad at actually finding paths. Even with some pointed prompt refining, some regeneration attempts, etc., it just never really got there. Eventually, I gave up. I took the base that it had given me and refined it and topped it off myself. And it took me just as long to clean it up, the one that it created, as starting with my own and iterating on it. And the point, you're not getting ready to run code out of GPT. So a developer still has a huge part to play in making it useful. This is why I kind of shake my head at those places that are in a mad dash to get rid of all their developers in favor of the AI. They're just going to end up reinvesting in the human element, because the reality is no AI is as good as a human at synthesizing, learning, and understanding on the fly. They're just not. Beyond this, there's another reason to be wary of generative AI models, not just the sketchy answers that it can produce from time to time. As with any big change, there is some looming backlash against large language models, in particular, those that use the internet without asking. And really, this is kind of the second big weakness of the LLM for your own uses, and a place that I personally would advise extremely strong caution. To put it bluntly, ChatGPT and other generative type tools are plagiarizing. Not in a malicious way. I'm not saying they're intended to be used that way. That's not what they are by design. It's a consequence of their training. They know what they know, which is what they were fed, which was the internet and every single publicly accessible thing in it. Here's a really, really simple example of why this is a really big problem. I can go right now and I can ask ChatGPT to explain to me how to use an application that my company makes, right? Including the steps, data entry points, all the kind of the basics, and walk me through it. My company's documentation is not available to the public. It is not publicly published on our website anywhere. So where did it learn that? How does it know how to do that? And what else does it know that it shouldn't, right? This gets even more tricky when you get into code. So think about Stack Overflow, Reddit, etc., contribution type sites. They generally use some version of a Creative Commons license. Did you even know that code snippets from Stack Overflow had a license? Yeah, they do. And it requires the use of the code, data, text, comment, whatever you have from those sites to be attributed back to the original poster. What that means in practical terms is when you copy and paste from Stack Overflow into your own code, which we all do, you are supposed to attribute it to that poster on Stack Overflow. And look, none of us do that, right? But we're supposed to. And now take that and extend it to something trained on the entire internet with no attribution, could be fully licensed or copywritten, worse, it could be completely proprietary, but republished in terms of use. This presents a huge issue for using generative AI for creating code. And it's one that extends beyond just code into literally anything publicly trained generative AI tools create, right? And we see that backlash in art, in writing, everywhere. The reaction here from most places is to say, all right, you know what? Forget it. We're going to do a private LLM that's just ours, just has our data. And look, this is fine. But two things emerge here. One, it kind of blunts the impact of the model because now it's just trained on your data and not everything. And that means it might not be able to be as relevant out of the box, right? It would take more time to get good at it. It also constrains it to your data and your information. So if your company gets something wrong all the time, so will the model. For example, on-premise versus on-premises, right? Everyone screws that up. And guess what? GPT does that too because it was trained on those mistakes. So while this private sounds great in theory because now it's just my data, there's even some sketchiness here about what the service provider is doing with the data you feed their model. Is it supposed to be yours and yours alone? Well, it depends on the contract, the T's and C's. Is it yours and yours alone? How do you prove that? Right? Thankfully, the T's and C's probably protect you, but not always. And this is why some companies have just outright said, you know what? No GPT until we figure out what the heck is going on and how we can protect ourselves and actually use this effectively. So it's for these kinds of reasons that there's so much uncertainty around the tools right now, even privately, like I said. They represent truly a powerful force for improvement and support. They're dead useful. And at the same time, they represent a massive copyright violation machine. They've also have serious considerations for compliance, and in heavily regulated industries are likely to be extremely bad for audit results if they're found to be in use, whether you know it or not. Remember shadow IT? This is another example of shadow IT. And this is perhaps the moment to mention one of my biggest and most important takeaways from this talk. The number one thing you can do here is to have a policy about the use of all GPT tools, public and private, and make sure it's actually being followed. Look, we all know how easy it is to just do something online, right? It's super easy. Unfortunately, that kind of thing leads you into getting into a lot of trouble. And look, the policy is not going to stop this. It never does. It's not. But it will protect your organization in the face of issues stemming from GPT use including use you didn't know was happening. So let's bring this all back to what does it mean for developer productivity then? I can't use the tool that will make them so productive I can replace them. Hooray. Then what? Right? The answer is generative AI wasn't going to replace developers anyway, period. It is going to force them to change what they do and how. These are the big takeaways for you to remember from this session when you leave. And what it means for us as leaders of development teams is twofold. Number one, your developers need to get smart about the business and about what your domain is in a hurry. You need to support them in understanding rules and regulations of the industry or the vertical that you're in, compliance issues your company faces, audited, unaudited, etc. Like the most direct thing is, educated developers are less likely to make simple mistakes that cause you issues. That's it. Business understanding as well is going to be required for developers in the post-GPT world because now everyone can write code. And while it sounds a little harsh, but if you don't understand the domain you're coding for, you're functionally no better than generative AI. And so you need to get good. And your developers now more than ever should be working hard to get those skills up, right? This is point 2. They may not be writing the original code as much, right? We may be using GPT to generate lots of it, but they're going to be reviewing it, and they're going to be reviewing lots of it. So pair programming, mentoring, skills improvement, all of it critical. Literally anything you can do to help support your juniors, top up your senior dev skill levels, all of it is going to pay real dividends for your team's productions. Now, what should I not do? Honestly, don't trust anything GPT gives you without review. It's wrong, or at least not quite right. And you probably should not trust it to build production-ready anything. It's useful as a starter. It's not a closer. And number 2, you know what you shouldn't do? Get rid of your developers. You need them now more than ever before. And in a world that is increasingly flooded with half-finished and mediocre GPT-generated code and text and everything else, they're going to be the only thing that gets you working in your domain where you need them to work. Your developer's experience, skill, and most importantly, ability to genuinely think and create is what you need now more than ever. GPT will do the boilerplate. It'll pull you out of those black hole moments, where you've written a million if statements, but you can't remember where the comma goes, and you have to look it up. And it'll generally provide supported information. It's generally a great option for searching for information because it explains a little bit more than you having to filter through search results. But it will never be as good as your developers are in your space, building your things. So support, enable, and most importantly, empower and educate your developers about what GPT is, what it isn't, and how important they are in the post-GPT world. So, in the words of ChatGPT to end our talk, in conclusion, as we navigate this post-GPT world, it's imperative that we strike a balance between the incredible potential of generative AI and the invaluable human expertise that has driven technology for decades. Remember, it's not about replacing developers, but empowering them. By embracing both the capabilities of AI and the enduring value of traditional skills and experience, we pave the way for a future of innovation and excellence. Bit too marketing for my tastes, but gets the point across. And in my words, thank you, good luck out there, and be good to one another.